Good evening, everyone, and I will call this meeting to order and ask if there are any disclosures of pecuniary interest on this agenda and the nature thereof. Well, he is there. Seeing none, we'll move on. Any announcements from Council? Councillor Watton?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a couple of things. First off, I attended the second strategic planning meeting at the region today, and they asked me to remind everyone to please do the online survey if you wish to have a say for the next 5-year strategic plan with the region. You can find it at durham.ca under Your Voice, and it only takes about 5, maybe 7 minutes, so if you're so inclined. I will note that Uxbridge had 43 respondents and Scugog had 15, so I'd like to really see us up that a little bit. And just again, a reminder of the Fall Festival on October 5th. It's a car show and chili cook-off. It starts at noon and runs till 5 at Cartwright Fields. The fee is $5 per person, with all the funds going directly back to the park. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kiesebrink?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I had the privilege of attending on September 12th, where Attorney General Doug Downey actually renamed the Oshawa Courthouse after Colonel Samuel Sharp. And it was really exciting to see our local Scugog artist, Tyler Briley. He made a beautiful, it was actually only a wax bust. It's going to be turned into a bronze. It was made with 120,000 maple leaves. And it was absolutely stunning. And he is such an incredible artist. He's already got work at Parliament and many other places, but to have him be chosen and his work featured that day, he really did all of us proud, and it is an honor to see this war hero honored in this way in our community. So I just want to extend a congratulations to Tyler.
Thank you. Councillor Guido?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. All of Council received an invitation, as well as the public, to the Pegasus Animal Sanctuary Open House, which is happening this weekend, September 22nd from 1 to 4. They'll have a lot of activities for kids, face painting, tattoos, silent auctions, as well as a barbecue. So that is an event that can be found on 2090 Scugog Line 3 in Port Perry. And I would also like to extend our thanks to the DAC Committee, the Durham Agricultural Advisory Committee, for an outstanding farm tour last Thursday. Most of us attended that, and it was such a great day. The location was perfect. We were able to host it in Scugog here at Willow Tree Farm, but it was just such a great event in celebrating agriculture. So I really appreciated the invitation for that. That's all. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
I understand that was the highest attendance that they had at the annual farm tour, so that's a nice feather in our caps. So, Councillor Brown?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the Mayor and myself and about 40 others built a jungle gym for a family in Scugog on Sunday. It rained until we were done and then it stopped. The group is called $1 Million Smiles, so Margie, Rosario, the fire department, Ginger, the usual do-good suspects were there. It's like a rink build, which is something I'm familiar with, and it was wonderful to be part of, only with rain. This is their 80th this year, so they have built in, I guess, Southern Ontario, if I understand correctly, something like 80 of these jungle gyms in 1 year for families. So it was a lot of fun, first time for me. Thank you.
It was a lot of fun, and this is for a family with a needy child. And to see the child surprised by this playground equipment is quite amazing. Yeah, wonderful day. Any others? Councillor McDougall?
I just wanted to thank everybody for their support at the Terry Fox Run on the weekend. I don't know if it was the largest turnout, but I certainly know that the parking lot at the fairgrounds was jammed full, and it was a beautiful day. So thank the community. Thank you.
Was a beautiful day. or for the Terry Fox run, but not while we were building the playground. Any other announcements from council? Announcements from staff? Director Valentin.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to remind everyone that we do have the municipal budget survey online as well. It's running until the end of this month, so I'm happy to report we have about 80 respondents so far.
Wonderful. That's great. Any other announcements from staff? Seeing none, then we will move on to 9 public meetings, 10 presentations and delegations. And I just want to let the people know who are here for the Oxnard development. We have some long delegations and presentations before you, so please be patient and sorry for the delay. And I'll call up Mr. David Anderson, President of Four Roads Management Services, Inc., to talk about report number 2019-029 on page 11. And we will bring that, with your blessing, we will bring that report forward after the delegations and questions to the delegation. Welcome, Mr. Anderson. Please go ahead.
It's different presentation. This is the one after mine, I think. Okay. Yeah, that's probably it. Thank you. Your Worship, members of council, thank you very much for the opportunity to do the work. We'll have a presentation on the findings of the report, and then I think there'll be opportunity for questions after that. So we'll talk about the scope, the methodology, state of the infrastructure, which is more in keeping in terms of terminology with the newer legislation as opposed to what you might be familiar with that have been on council for a long time, a roads needs study. Same kind of idea. Talk about funding and the recommendations. And then, as I said, we'll probably have time for some questions at the end. So an overview of the project scope was to review the condition and rate the condition of every road section within the township and edit as required, and maybe modify some of the sections if that was required in terms of length or whatever. Recommend improvements and costing, estimate the improvement cost, and then what the current replacement cost was. Analyze the effect of current recommended budgets on the overall system, develop a 10-year plan, provide asset management strategy recommendations. The township uses the same software as I was using, so provide them an updated database, and training on work tech, and then an updated geodatabase. So the geodatabase is just that mapping that you see at the back. So the backbone of that is a database behind it. The report methodology, we won't go into a lot of detail in that. I do a bit of a training course on that. It takes hours to go through it. But what I wanted to highlight is that Regulation 588-17 requires a description in the municipality's approach to assessing the condition of assets. So in this case, we've used the inventory manual, and it's generally accepted because it's produced by the Ministry of Transportation, and that we believe is appropriate for the Township of Scugog road system. So that's just a screen capture of what the manual looks like. It's a fairly dry read if you ever wanted to read it, but the road conditions are field inspected value. The ratings are standalone value or incorporated into calculations. So for instance, we would measure the width of a road, but that translates into a score out of 1 to 10 for the road width, similarly with shoulder width and things like that. Other aspects are straight measurement in the field that then are incorporated into a database which does background calculations to produce needs or a rating in 6 critical areas: geometric, surface type, surface width, capacity, structural adequacy, and drainage. So from a end user perspective, this is a much more holistic review than looking at just condition alone. Structural adequacy would be the parallel of condition. So we've looked at a number of different aspects to come up with an overall determination of what the recommendation is. The time of need is a prediction of the time until the road requires reconstruction, not the time frame until action required. I think that's very important to keep in mind when you're reviewing it. So for instance, if you have a road that's categorized as R1 for resurfacing single lift and it says it's a 6 to 10 year need, that doesn't mean that you put it off for 6 to 10 years. That means if you don't resurface it, it will be a reconstruction need in 6 to 10 years. So that time of need is more of a prediction model. The road system constitution, all of the measurements that we've shown here are adjusted for your boundary roads. So by that I mean if you had a boundary road that was a kilometer on the Kawartha boundary, for instance, it would show up as a half a kilometer in this, this query that we've made. So your overall system is around 430 kilometers, but adjusted for the boundary roads, it's 411. So we have a number of aspects of it. We have a significant portion of the road system that is gravel, is what's showing up in our first chart there. 46% of the road system is gravel. From a roadside environment and functional class, now this is by the inventory manual. What we've tried to do is align the collectors and arterials, which you don't have any arterials, but collector roads with the regulation 58817. The system condition can be looked at in a number of different ways. This chart here I find very useful because it doesn't have any numbers on it. So regardless of the asset rating system, and you can also apply this concept to a number of assets. What we really look at in terms of, there's a target level, say, let's call it 70, and that would be our trigger to do a resurfacing. So the recommendation from the Transportation Association of Canada is what we should have our target level of service just above that level that would be a trigger for a pavement rehabilitation. You can apply this concept to a number of assets. It works out reasonably well, and it's a good way of using a concept rather than maybe a hard number. So for our purposes, we measured structural adequacy as a number out of 20, 14 out of 20. Generally not that well understood, so we translate that to a number out of 100, and 70 out of 100 people generally get. So from the previous slide, we talked about that rating and having that 14 out of 20 is maybe our target. So when we look at this chart in the top right corner, you can see that's our break point between a 6 to 10 year need and then into an adequate road. The average system is at 8.76. We'd prefer to see it somewhere and recommend to see it at 14 or above. So the current condition overall is nearing poor. This chart on the left, which probably doesn't show up very well on the screen, is included in the report, but that just shows the distribution of good, fair, poor, and good to very good roads. What we try to do is predict how the roads will perform based on standard construction and identified standard performance or typical performance over time. So to put it in perspective, though, of the time of need, when we look at these at the top end of the curve, there's my mouse, you can see the pointer. At the top end of the curve, whether it's a gravel road, this would be the opportune time to do gravel road resurfacing if the road was in a reasonable condition. Typically, that's when we're doing preservation type activities, surface treatment, microsurfacing, preservation. A 6 to 10 year need is a little bit lesser condition, but we would want to do a resurfacing in that kind of window of condition. So notice the curves are different. Some deteriorate more quickly. So this one on the far left would be a high volume road, over 20,000 cars a day, and we'd anticipate that we might have to resurface it at about 9 or 10 years, whereas a local subdivision road, the trigger for the resurfacing is the same number, but we expect that it will reach that condition in something like 18 or 19 years. So the performance will vary dependent on traffic. It will also vary dependent on surface type. So the examples we've shown here are just for hot mix asphalt. I'd like to highlight this graph and spend a minute or two on that, and the following graph leads into a bit more discussion on it. But this type of information or this concept has been around for quite a while. I've been using this as a slide since about 1997. It was in a document called The Whole Story from the American Public Works Association in 1983. So basically what it's saying is that if we do prepare roads or do work on roads, can't get my mouse to show up here, at a certain time period, it's much cheaper and a better return on investment than it is to let it go to a lower condition overall. It's more expensive to maintain and manage the system on that basis. So looking at that same curve, at the top end of the curve, we want to do our crack sealing, gravel road resurfacing, surface treatment, other preservation activities. Where I've got resurface one lift, that's typically that $1 value. I guess we wish it was only $1, but in reference to what other costs are. And as we deteriorate, or as we go further down the deterioration curve, the cost to make a repair is higher, and the return on investment is lesser. So when we get to the bottom of the curve, it's typically a reconstruction type of activity, and we have a decreasing return on investment and increasing cost. Depending on the organization, and we'll talk about modifying this thought process through maybe a paradigm shift a little bit later, is some organizations like to think at the top end of the curve is operational, and the lower side is a capital product. When I slide the slide from 1983 under it, you can see how well this aligns with the ideas that have been around for a significant period of time. What we do when we create a performance model is we want to select through return on investment is the treatments that are at the top end of the curve. So you want to do those activities for roads that are in the appropriate condition. Doing those activities in roads that are in very poor condition is not going to result in a good performance or get the life expectancy or extension that you would anticipate. When we looked at running a performance model for 50 years to see how the different funding levels would work out, there's a number of different funding levels we've shown here. I think I got a bit of a typo in here. The capital depreciation, I think, should be more like 7.27 or 29 or something like that, if I remember. This I wouldn't have updated when I dropped in the new performance curves with the revised budget. And I've also dropped in a performance with an increased budget over a 10-year period. The yellow line is a line depicting the current, or maintained rather, performance over it. And the green lines are the short-term preservation in your current budget. So your current budget is very close to that. The preservation budget theoretically will work, but that's if every recommendation is followed and every performance is exactly as we anticipate. So here's our work plan as developed by performance model. I like to put this in just to illustrate that the bottom line is the same every year, but the different activities are at various funding levels or levels that change on an annual basis because we're selecting the right treatment at the right time and making the best value of the available funding. So that's really what we're trying to demonstrate through this slide, and it is a chart within the report. Where this is leading to is a discussion on a paradigm shift. So traditionally, municipalities have approached programming as fixed dollars in certain areas, like I need to spend X on capital and X on operating. And as we move towards more pure asset management, and that's where Regulation 588.17 is taking us, because basically Part 4 of the asset management plan says that we have to develop a work plan that is based on selecting the lowest cost treatments to maintain the condition of the assets over a 10-year period. So that's quite a bit different from spending X in capital and X in operating. It's spending the right amount of money at the right time. So the gross funding should be sufficient to sustain or improve the asset group, so that's the target. Arbitrary limitations to those categories, like capital or operating, will result in maybe a reduced performance. And you'll be missing opportunities to undertake the right treatment at the right time. So this isn't from your system, because this took several hours to put together, but from a system, it's trying to display the concept of the different treatments over a 50-year period. And you'll see that they're highly variable in terms of the expenses on different treatments in different years. But in the overall budget, if I lumped capital and operating together, I have a reinvestment amount. And if I reinvest that amount every year, then I should be able to maintain or increase the condition of the system. So measuring one of the levels of service, there's 3 levels of service in your report. Over time, we're looking at the weighted average condition of the assets. So we've taken the structural adequacy multiplied it by 5 to get a number out of 100, and then we've looked at weighting it for the length of the road section. So that's probably the most appropriate methodology to come out with a truer sense of the condition of the system. So it has been slowly deteriorating since we started measuring it with this software in 2010. I did work for a consulting firm prior to the firm I'm with now, and we did have records that extended quite some time in the past. So this graph is another measure of level of service, and it's the system adequacy. So system adequacy, it's one measure. It can be misleading at times, but in this case, what it shows us is the system adequacy is the percentage of roads that are not poor. So the inverse would be there's over 50% of the roads are slightly over 50% of the roads in poor condition. And it has been in a poor condition for a period of time now. So with respect to those levels of service measurements, the system adequacy is 49.9. So about half the system is in poor condition. Where that measure is a little bit misleading, if the trigger was 35 for a poor road and every road was scored 36, it would be 100% adequate. Next year, it would be 0. So that measure is just one measure, and you've got to make several level of service measurements so as you can identify what's going on with the system. So another example would be if I had 20% poor roads, but the overall average was going down, that would mean a couple of potential things. I'm not spending enough money, I'm not spending money on the right activities. So we need a couple of different measures of service to truly identify what's going on with the system. So the condition's approaching poor, and based on the current funding level, it will hover in that condition for a long time. And the average road has less than 5 years remaining service life without funding until it's in poor condition. So with respect to the programming and needs, resurfacing and rehabilitation retreatments required on 7.889 centerline kilometers and 1.85, I think the decimal's in the wrong place there. A resurfacing or rehab treatment is required on 69.8 centerline kilometers, and 18 of those kilometers are now needs, and it's anticipated that that will grow by 10 kilometers in the next 1 to 2 year period. So with respect to the asset sustainability, the funding is only marginal to sustain the system if deterioration occurs as anticipated and if the program is enacted as comes out of the model. So the condition of the system and the current funding levels push the management of the system to be more reactive than proactive, and I think you're probably all familiar with that. So the gravel roads over time are getting wider and not being strengthened. So in 2011, the average gravel width was 7.6 and the average gravel platform width was 8 meters in 2019. So we understand that a significant amount of money is being put into the gravel roads, but they're getting wider and not stronger. A number of the gravel roads had little to no crossfall in many locations, so this would accelerate deterioration because if they're not got appropriate crossfall, then the water would tend not to run off, it would tend to soak in, so that would produce potholes more quickly. And in some instances, the surface treated roads are not performing well and have many repairs, but significant percentages of some sections are due to resurfacing not occurring, so they're just old, rather than having a regular surface treatment resurfacing program rather than structural issues. So when reviewing the roads, it seemed that the root cause seemed to be age rather than maybe a structural performance. The total improvement needs are 189.9 million. Now needs are 138.9 million. The 1 to 10 year needs are 51 million. And of all of those needs, 24.8 million is included on sections that are adequate. And why I add that in there is that by the inventory manual, roads with less than 50 cars a day are adequate, but from a pragmatic perspective, it's not that they can be ignored. So they might be scored or rated as adequate because of their low traffic volume, but we've made recommendations on how to improve those roads regardless of that parameter in the manual. The manual was written that way years ago because the thinking was that low volume roads would come out of the operations budget rather than capital. So our budget recommendations are 7.269 million for roads capital depreciation. The estimated replacement cost of the road system is 363.5 million, which is not insignificant. That's a lot of money, and the current value of the system is estimated to be 268 million. For the average hot mix surfacing, we have estimated based on a weighted average of the, based on traffic volumes of the road, of $1.3 million per year. Gravel roads are surprisingly expensive. So if you have a gravel road and you wanted to resurface it 3 inches, 75 millimeters every 3 years, that's $1.7 million. So it makes sense to review those and what the strategy may be. $324.4 million, or $1,000 rather, for the average annual surface treatment, and $58,000 for the average annual crack sealing. Why I've split it out this way leads to the next slide. And what I try to say is how I've created the short-term sustainable funding or preservation budget is by adding up the bottom 4 numbers, and if the road was built perfectly and maintained perfectly, that theoretically should sustain the system. So that's the essence of what the short-term funding level is, but ultimately we will have to reconstruct roads, so that is what the long-term sustainable funding number is. So ideally we should be in that funding window to sustain the system. I've made a number of recommendations with respect to the road system. The information and budget recommendations included in this report should be used to further develop and evolve the corporate asset management plan. Increase the roads funding to the capital depreciation funding level over the next 10-year period. Ensure that the preservation and resurfacing programs are optimized. That means picking the right road at the right time, rather than prioritizing the now needs roads or the the roads that are our $5 needs, because that's a low return on investment. So the cycle of review of the road system should be reviewed in order to monitor the system more frequently. And so right now you've been maybe 4 or 5 years between reviews. So I'm suggesting you review that and make it 4 years or less. That way you can measure the improvements and you can start to make decisions based on current conditions. Asset management's very dynamic, so what we really want to do is keep on top of making the right treatment decisions at the right time. So if the creating a 10-year plan and adhering to that without further update of conditions is going to be problematic in terms of performance, because you could have varying performances over time. So the gravel sections require further investigation to determine appropriate geotechnical requirements for improvements. We've made recommendations based on the condition they're in and treatments in the inventory manual. There may be some underlying soils conditions in some areas that will require further definition. The township should consider increasing the township of Scugog staff involvement in the analysis and development of the asset management plan. I say that because assets are at the core of every service you deliver. You deliver service to the public through the assets, so understanding those assets better and managing them on a different level or a different methodology, I think would be beneficial. Traffic counts should continue to be updated and repeated on a regular basis. Truck counting, the counting should include the percentage of truck traffic. Truck traffic has a higher level of damage, or heavy vehicles have a higher level of damage to a road. Roadside safety audit should be undertaken to assess the potential safety requirements. So why I say that is we've identified a number of potentially substandard horizontal and vertical curves, and they should be addressed to make sure that the signage is appropriate and as per the sign manuals. Road rationalization study should be undertaken if all township assets are required. So you may have roads that if by closing them they do not landlock a property, maybe that's an alternative. It would reduce the funding requirements. Recommendations with respect to service levels, 60% for system adequacy, average condition 70, and the level of service for good to very good should be at 60. The work plan should be followed to optimize investments and performance of the road system. And moving forward, my suggestions are recognize the reactivity element and deal with those situations by providing holding treatments. So recognizing that we can't increase the budget significantly all at once, but at the same time we have to deliver services and make roads passable. So some roads may not get the 100% correct treatment is what I'm suggesting here, but maybe a holding strategy. And then other roads will have the preferred treatment, but it's not going to cripple the selection of the correct treatment on the other projects. Increase the budget, as I've recommended earlier, over the next 10 years. And one of the factors I see happening in a lot of municipalities is they increase the roads budget, but it's taking money from other assets. And you're responsible for a lot of different assets, and all of them require the same type of concept in asset management in terms of funding and doing right treatments at the right time. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Wow. Thank you very much for your presentation tonight, and thank you for giving us your expertise on this. We've got excellent staff here, but with this type of project, we need a level of expertise that your company can provide for us. None of us here are experts on roads. We have an engineer on council, but we don't have any experts on roads, and thank goodness we have an excellent staff. So I'm interested, interesting that you on slide 19 started your graph at the 1980s was when the province downloaded roads to municipalities fully. In the last few years, they've started grants, and I think recognizing that they kind of dropped the ball there back in the 80s. So it's especially hard for municipalities like ours that have a large rural component to keep up with the standards on our roads, especially our rural roads. So anyway, council, any questions of the presentation? Councillor Watton?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a question for my own, I guess, ignorance. When you said the gravel roads are getting wider and not stronger, what would prevent that?
I think there might be some operating procedures you need to review, because when the strength comes from making them deeper.
Right.
And for whatever reason, between 2010, I think we identified that, and also this time they are progressively getting wider. So some of the maintenance practices may be leading to that occurring. Okay. That was my observation, and supported through the average, doing the analysis on the average measurements.
And just also, again, just for clarity, the crossfall, is that like the center line?
Yeah, from the center line outward, it should slope towards the outside of the road. So ideally, on a paved surface, you want minimum 2%. I would suggest on a gravel road surface, you need a little bit greater than 2% to make sure that the water is running off the road and not settling in.
And just one further question, if I may, Madam Mayor. I think you said that we are sitting at, is it 3%, and we should be 8% for gravel on the roads, or did I have those numbers wrong? I can't remember now. I don't have it in front of me either now.
Do you want to go back to it? Okay. Other questions of the presentation? Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you. The target level that you identified in the report is at 70 in a number. It's throughout the presentation.
Yes.
Is that a number that is identified for Scugog, or is that a general number regardless of you're in Scugog, Whitby, Toronto? Is this an all roads number, or is it specific for Scugog?
It's one I use for all systems. And it depends really on your evaluation methodology. So if you were using a different scoring system, the trigger point for, if you were, for instance, using the MTO's methodology, which is a little bit more high-tech. For their road system, the trigger might be 75 to 80 because it's a different methodology. So that's why I like this, because I can apply the concept of what's the trigger for a resurfacing dependent on what the methodology is that I'm using. So in the inventory manual, 14 out of 20 is a trigger for a resurfacing, which is 70 out of 100. So when I look at this document from the Pavement Asset Design and Management Guide, and it says the trigger value for pavement rehabilitation, we want to be above that. So I know in the methodology I'm using, it's 70. So then I want it to be 70, so that's why the recommendation's there.
Okay, because 70 is used as a benchmark for a lot of the recommendations here, and that our roads are currently sitting well below that in the 50s. And this is the catalyst for bringing our roads up to, when we look at the timelines, the 2045, we eventually hit that 70 mark based on certain funding. Given that we're a rural municipality, we have limited funding, we have different roads, different uses for the roads, is that 70 a proper benchmark for putting so many of the assumptions that we have that go into policy?
Yeah, I deal with about 50 municipalities, and I use that same trigger, and there's lots of municipalities that are similar to yourself that are at that in that range. So I don't think it's out of line that way. So yeah, that's why I continue to use that, and that is what the MTO used to use in effect for your system years ago. So they used to use 60% system adequacy, which is a different level of service measure. So 40% of your roads were poor, but within that overall average, you could still have a weighted average of 70.
Okay. One of the, your report, it's figure 8.1, it's the treatment cost versus the deterioration. It's the graph that the asset management strategy that you mentioned that you've been using for a number of years. I think you said 1997, is that right?
Yeah, this one here, yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
So this is what my understanding is, what I'd like to say is kind of where the rich get richer and the poor stay poor in this, and that the good roads, we maintain them as we go. And so that if you have a good road in front of you, you're going to have that for a long time because money's going to be continued to be put into it to keep it at its standard. And if you're beyond that needs now and you don't see your road being fixed anytime soon, it may stay as a need now for some time. Is there, I was just a bit, when you said it's been used since 1997, is there no update or a new way of looking at how to maintain roads? Just with the 189 million of road infrastructure needed. There are roads that are so poor now that are not on the 5-year projection. They won't see it, 10 years perhaps. So later on, we're going to have a discussion about levies and everything. This is the model that we're using, that the Director Coleman's using for the management of the roads right now. Is this the most current model that is out there to deal with roads that we have in our community?
Return on investment, this is basically where the regulation is pushing you in terms of selecting the lowest cost treatment to maintain your system condition over time. That's what the regulation basically says. So that is your selection. So if you have limited funding and you want to build a $5 road, that $5 road will cost next year $5 and $5 the year after. But I can keep these roads, so there's two parts to this in terms of funding. Is the road that requires total rehabilitation will continue to require total rehabilitation. If we miss the roads that need a minor rehabilitation, then they will become total rehabilitation. So we want to avoid that, but part of that ties into the overall budget as well. So in the last part of the recommendations, the strategy I'm suggesting is recognize that try to keep the good roads good, with available funding, but then that should be satisfied, or hopefully would be satisfied with slightly less in your current budget, and then do some holding type strategies on the $5 roads. It might not be the 100% correct fix, but it is going to do a holding strategy. So what, in part of my municipal life, what we had was a maintenance paving budget or a maintenance rehabilitation budget. So for the roads that I couldn't get to, I recognized that there might have to be some interim treatment. So it might not raise it to a condition where I'd expect 20 or so years life out of it, but it might buy me 5 years. So you have to have, I think, with your asset management strategy going forward, a bit of a blend of both things to go on, to recognize, you know, the budget will increase over time, but in the short term, you want to optimize what available funding you do have, and maybe get rid of some of the problem roads, or tide them over, if you will, as a holding strategy. So you might use holding strategies a little bit more than would be preferred, but that probably is where you have to go with your overall roads management for the short term anyway.
Just so that we're completely understand here, so the good roads will be maintained over time because it's cheaper to do so.
Mm-hmm.
And if the poor roads and needs now roads will continue to gain the quantity of them, because at our current funding rates, we are not able to attack them at the rate that it's growing. Would that be a correct statement?
Well, I think, I'm trying to find my slide here where so what we're looking at in your current budget is that if everything performed, that's the dark green line, and the short-term preservation in your current budget are essentially the same. So they're kind of matched together in shades of green there. So what we're saying is the road is, as you suggested, it's in overall poor condition at the current funding level. However, at the current funding level, if you do the right treatments at the right time, it will end up staying at least the same as what it's showing there. But it's a matter of managing it with the right treatments at the right time, or what the program suggests, because in this slide, what we're trying to show you is some of the roads, there's a great variance in the different treatments that we would do to maintain that. So it looks like in 2020, there's a significant amount of double surface treatment and rehab work that would be done, and R2 urban rehabs that would be done. So that kind of, and then the following year, there's no double surface treatment rehabs, and so on. So there's a difference in the treatments that get done, and they're not all at that top end of the curve, because we have the R2U, if I draw your attention down to the lower part of the graph here, these are in reconstruction, so there is very little reconstruction going on, but the R2U rehab, so these are urban R2s, which means the road's in reasonably poor condition. You're going to replace both lifts of asphalt, so there is a real mix of activities that is coming out of the model in terms of trying to sustain the system.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor McDougall, did I see your hand?
No, but sure, I can ask a couple questions I can think of. Actually, looking at this graph right here, or slide, is the gravel road resurfacing on this slide?
Yeah, they're GRR and GRR2.
And is that in thousands?
No, that's just straight gravel road resurfacing. A lot of your gravel roads are BS, basin surface tolerable.
Okay.
So that's the recommendations, and some of them are reconstructs.
So in
there is-
2020, it's $6,273. Is that what
That's
it's
just for gravel road resurfacing, so it's a very short amount, yes. Because as I say, a lot of them are basin surface tolerables.
Sorry, can you clarify, through you, Madam Mayor, can you clarify what you mean by basin surface tolerables?
For a lower volume road, depending on what the condition is when we look at it, and the type and extent of defects that we see, a low volume road, there is this treatment in the inventory manual that, dependent on the classification of the road, it will add different amounts of gravel to different widths to correspond to what the road should be. So for instance, on a lower volume road, base and surface tolerable would add 150 mils of B and 150 mils of A and put a 0.75 meter end area of ditching on either side, so it will enhance the drainage and it will add gravel.
So, sorry, just for clarification through Madam Mayor, I'm just flipped to Carol's report because it was easier for me to find the number. Gravel road resurfacing, it says new gravel every 3 years. It said recommended annual budget is 1.686 million.
Yes.
So I'm just trying to correlate the 6,273 to 1.686.
Well, it doesn't correlate that way. So for me to come up with some idea of the constitution of your system, so if every road was built perfectly, then I would have to add a gravel road was built perfectly, I'd have to add 75 mils of gravel every 3 years. So on that so I'm trying to develop a budget level. So that would be the ideal funding level. And then similarly with the hot mix, and then similarly with the surface treatment. So then I can develop what should be a level of funding that should sustain the system over time. And then I can take that overall budget number and then select the right treatment at the right time. So in some ways, I've gone old school to say, this is ideally what you should need. Now let's take that funding amount and say, apply it to the system, and where would be the best place to put that material at this time.
So although we're saying we need 1.686 million towards gravel resurfacing, it might not be the best spot for us to put our money. Is that what I'm understanding?
That's what's, we look at each one of those activities as a return on investment or a treatment effect. So the treatment effect for a gravel road resurfacing is to hold the condition for 3 years. If the road's in poor condition, then holding it for 3 years in poor condition would be like a waste of money. So if you're only putting on small amounts of gravel, and I see that happening in a lot of municipalities where they're putting on a little bit of gravel on every road, and you're essentially wasting your money because the structure's not there and it basically disappears. So it holds the condition. The gravel resurfacing 2 would increase the condition by 20. So you can see out to the later years of this, we're spending a bit more money on gravel resurfacing 2 lifts. Now, some of your gravel roads also would be covered off with that base and surface tolerable treatment. So there is money in there that would be used on gravel roads, but it looks on the return on investment, say of a double surface treatment, raises the condition to 95. So if we did a double surface treatment rehab on those certain roads, it would raise the condition better, and that's not a real expensive activity. So it has a high return on investment.
Thank you. Further, Madam Mayor, if I might. In the report, it mentions that it talks about keeping track.
We're going to go to the report next. Do
Or-
you want to save your question for the report, or
No,
is it to the
it's in his
delegation?
study, yes.
Okay.
In your report, it mentions about keeping track of trucks and the quantity of trucks and how heavy they are.
Mm-hmm.
It talks about a value of a truck being equal to 12,000 passenger cars. Is that accurate?
We measure loads in equivalent single axle loads. So an equivalent single axle load is 8 tons. A car is 0.0002 equivalent single axle loads. So that translates into about 12,000 cars for an equivalent single axle load. A transport truck would run somewhere between 2.5 and 3, depending on the transport truck, the number of axles, if they're tandems or if they're single axles. So all of those factors make a difference. So there isn't a cut and dried straight answer to that. There's a bit more analysis that would have to go into what the effect is, but the thrust of it is that yes, a truck or farm equipment or whatever has significant loading that affects the road. So what I'm trying to convey in that message is that if you've got that type of traffic on a road, having a road in poor condition and putting 3 inches of gravel on it, it's still going to be in poor condition because that's not sufficient to carry the load.
So, if I might, through you, Madam Mayor. So if we look at our AADTs at the roads in the study, is that reflective in terms of how many trucks we're seeing on those roads?
We try to, in the inventory manual, low volume roads We estimate that there's 3% commercial traffic on a lower volume road. If it's an industrial area, then the number goes up. If it's an upper tier road or an arterial, then the estimate for the percentage of heavy vehicles goes up. So in your consideration of a treatment, you want to look at what the actual traffic is and maybe what the percent trucks is. And then within the inventory manual, different volumes of roads have different standardized designs for a reasonable soil condition. If you've got poor soil conditions, so road structure will change with two things. It will change with poor soils, increase the structure. With increased heavy traffic, the structure has to increase. So those are the kind of factors that would go into the design when you get to the design stage.
Just one question. I have a lot of constituents in my ward. I'm Reach Township, so the road ward with all the wetlands, let's call them. They have considerable complaints about the stuff that's stuck to their vehicles and trailers, etc., their brake calipers and that sort of thing. So it's the material that's on the roads. They're saying it's high in clay or something that's sticking to their vehicles and causing wear to their components. Is there any comment as to that?
A gravel road's a gravel road. By the Ontario provincial standards, there has to be between 2 and 8% material passing the 75 micron sieve, which is typically, that's very fine material. 75 microns is about the size of a hair on your head. So by design, we need 2 to 8% in granular A. So your granular A could be perfectly within spec, and it would have to have that much amount of material. If there's too little fine material, the big stones don't hold together. So you need a certain amount of fine material in there. As to what the residents are getting at, I'm not 100% sure, but it could be some of the native soil may be an issue in some areas as well.
And just one question. So does speed affect the gravel on the roads? I mean, is the granular tend to be thrown off with the faster moving vehicles?
I don't know so much as speed, but certainly depth. So if you put on a thin layer of gravel, for instance, I hear numbers kicked about sometimes that say we put 300 or 400 tons of gravel per kilometer down. You have to, I don't want to make it too detailed, but the nominal maximum aggregate size in granular A is 19 millimeters. If you put down 400 tons a kilometer, you're putting down less than 1 stone thick. If you put down less than 1 stone thick, then the effect is that those stones are loose stones, and then they would fly all over the place. So maybe the applications methods might have something to do with it also. So I wouldn't try to nail it down to any one particular thing, but there's a lot of possibilities.
Okay,
Very good, thank you.
thank you. To the delegation, Councillor Kiesebrink, I think you had your hand up, did you? Okay, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll try to be brief because I know we've got a lot to go through. Thank you, Mr. Anderson, first of all. Do I understand, is Director Coleman going to speak to this momentarily?
Yes, when we
Okay.
bring the report forward.
Okay, then I'll be as brief as I can be. Do I understand that the roads in Scugog are 49.9% poor or now? Would that be accurate?
A systematic was these 49.9, I think, so that would mean 50.1% are poor.
Okay, and you said that you've sort of seen this type of thing before in your travels in other municipalities, I presume? Would that be?
I've seen, yeah, I look at anywhere from 3,500 to 5,000 kilometers a year.
So what in your experience have other municipalities done in this type of situation? Because you've obviously seen it before.
Well, funding is certainly an issue, and the approach to management of the gravel roads, like the simpler things like keeping the crossfall at a reasonable crossfall so water does run off, putting down thicker lifts of gravel so as we don't have those loose stones, recognizing what the underlying soil conditions might be, because that may be exacerbating some of your conditions here in Scugog. It might not be a soil that's able to support a lot of load, and that's why in some cases you see it punching through the top. So if you're only putting down or dealing with it through an application of a thin lift of gravel and then the next year a thin lift of gravel, it's just perpetuating instead of dealing with it comprehensively.
So in your estimation, and again through you, Madam Mayor, how many years would it take for us to get to where we should be in terms of the roads that exist here?
Well, if you increase the budget, you're still looking at probably 20-plus years. So it's significant because it's taken 20 years to get here. Like from that one graph that we talked about earlier, it's taken a while to get down here. It'll take a while to go back, and it's, you know, there's significant funding required.
Thank you.
Thank you. And again, thank you, Mr. Anderson,
Thank you.
for your presentation and all the work that you've done for us. So, and with council's blessing, we'll move along right to, I'm sorry, I need a motion to receive the delegation. Councilor Keysbrink, Councilor Watton, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, now we will move, with your blessing, to page 11. And this report, thank you, I think, Director Coleman, because this is not good news, and the presentation was not good news. We are suffering badly from, first of all, the downloading and lack of human and financial resources to deal with our roads over the last number of years. We knew that the news was going to be bad. I mean, that's evident in our activities last fall as councillors and people who were running in the election. This is what we heard. Practically every house that we stopped at. So, but this news is even worse than we all thought. So, I will ask you if there's anything you would like to highlight in the report, and then we can move on to questions.
Thank you, Mayor Drew, and thank you to David Anderson for doing this study and presenting it. I don't think it was surprising to anybody. I think we all know our roads in general are in poor condition and need to be improved. I know our staff in Public Works hear this daily from phone calls and emails that we receive, and I know council receive them as well. So when I first read the report, it's a little bit overwhelming. It's a little bit depressing of the state we're in. But we had several discussions among staff, and we are moving in the right direction. If you look at the spending on page 16, you can see that overall there's been a trend that we have been increasing our budget. 2010 was a little bit higher. Old Scugog Road was done that year, but since then the roads budget's been between 1 and 2 million for 6 years. But in 2017 there was a large jump because we had received a grant for line 6 reconstruction. But you can still see the trend in 18 and 19. It's going upwards. So we are going in the right direction. But overall, if we want to improve roads, I think the simple message is we need more funding. And we would love to get that from other levels of government. We will continue to try to do that. But I don't think we can rely on that as a sustainable source. I think that what we're recommending is to increase our roads levy. And we're proposing a 3% increase every year for 10 years. And then in about 25 years, we will be up to that 70% level. So it's a long-term plan. It's a short-term pain for a long-term gain. It's 3% sounds like a lot, but in talking to finance, it's about $3.28 a month for the average home in Scugog. So, you know, would you be willing to pay an extra $40 a year to have our roads increase over time is sort of the question we're asking the public through the budget survey, and we're asking council today with our recommendations here to do a 3% increase for 10 years. Now, I know this council can't commit to that because you can't tie hands of other councils in the future, but if it's something that we would like the council to consider each year as we prepare the budget, and if we get that direction from council, we can prepare a much better 10-year work plan. There's so many more roads that will be able to fit in that work plan than if we just maintain the current budget. I think that's all that I'd like to say, but if you have questions, be happy to answer them.
Okay, I will ask for a mover, and I just want to just reiterate to council that this part 2 of the recommendation that the annual budget process be raised by 3% for the roads levy. That is a recommendation to the budget process. We are not approving a 3% increase tonight. This is all part of the annual budget process. So with that in mind, I will take some questions. Councillor Guido? Councillor Watton?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'll move it as well if we need to do that in order to
Okay.
speak to
Seconded? Okay.
Thank you,
okay, go
Madam
ahead.
Mayor. Director Coleman, so this report for the average citizen who has been anticipating seeing the results of this, it was difficult for myself to interpret and understand after reading it many times. How does this impact our 5-year forecast for the roads in our capital budget? The prioritization of the current identified roads, will it be changed based on this report?
Director Coleman?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, we intend to keep the same projects in our 5-year forecast that are there. What we plan to do is when we add new projects to the end, we're going to increase the preventive maintenance projects that we do. So following asset management strategy, we should be doing more preventive maintenance than we are. We are doing some, but we want to increase that level. But we also know we can't ignore the roads that have failed. Like, we have to do a certain percentage of those roads each year. So what's in the budget now will stay there. If council does give us a 3% roads levy increase, we can shift some of those budgets forward in that, and we can add more projects to the end of it.
Okay, thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. I know some constituents on Old Simcoe in a specific section from Jeffrey to King were concerned that perhaps the results of this may push out their road to an even future date. So it's nice to know that if everything goes as it is, that the capital project identified already will proceed. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Watton?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And just with respect to, and to the comments given about the road levy, I know that is a question on the budget survey. Do we have any early results on what the general populace of the number returned feel?
Through you, Madam Mayor. So I did mention earlier we have about 80 respondents so far. Of that particular question on the roads levy, whether, I think there were 5 options: to do nothing, add 1%, 2%, 3%, or follow the asset management plan and do 3% for 10 years. The early results do show that 50% are in favor of the last option, to do 3% over the 10 years.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to Director Coleman. Earlier statement about the $40 a year, which would be the 3% roads levy increase. In your report here, it says the 3% road levy be considered each year. Can either yourself or Director Valentin just explain to council what the word considered means, and what, I know we're not talking budget right now, but so that we're all clear, that my understanding is that we're considering it so that you will base your budget at this point, your forecast, on that 3%. So it will be difficult to walk it back later on. Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Mayor. So we'll be coming forward with a budget target report that I would ask council to endorse, so that it gives us direction as far as the staff. So we last year did a capital budget and a 4-year forecast. So the forecast is always reviewed annually for that new budget coming forward, because only the current year is actually approved. What happens is there are assumptions that are built into that program, that assumptions as far as funding availability for the different reserves and for the different assets that come forward. So based on the information that council provides us, if I get direction that they'll consider 3%, we would build that assumption into the program. If it gets pulled back, we would have to adjust the projects and either push them out, or, I mean, the positive thing is we could also get grant funding, which would then accelerate some projects. So there is a bit of a moving target. We're always approving the current year coming forward, and the other 4 are approved in principle, but we do need some sort of funding assumptions that we can build on. If I assume no increase, you won't see very many projects in there.
Okay, thank you. Just further more on the road sides of thing, the current system that's in place, if I'm talking to a resident on the island who has a bad road in front of them, and they say, yes, I'm willing to spend 3%, I'm willing to hand over two $20 bills to you every year, and then they see that their road isn't on the list because it meets this threshold, it's below the threshold of having a new road, because either for whatever reason, but it's not one of the roads that's going to be continually upgraded. How do we get those roads moved up? Because there are a number, as our last budget showed, there's a number of roads that aren't on there, and we can all drive down them and say, this is a horrible road, but it's not on there because the needs now list is so huge, and the number that we're looking at funding, with the current plan that you have right now, how do we get those roads attended to so that they're not always, we're looking at a generationally bad road going ahead?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. You've said it right that right now we have a huge backlog of roads and a lot of needs out there. So with current funding levels, it could be a very long time till we get to those roads. If we can increase the funding, we can bring more roads into it. You can see from the graph though, we're not going to catch up right away. The first 5 years will be a very gradual increase. Then the curve will go up more after that. So by 25 years, most of those bad roads will be dealt with. But without the additional funding, we'll just maintain as we are now. So a good road now will probably deteriorate over time, and a bad road, we'll fix it. But on an average, all the roads will be at the same level they're at now.
Okay, thank you. Just in regards to you, Madam Mayor, in regards to the fourth recommendation that you have with the principals, the asset management and to prioritize preventative maintenance such as the hot mix resurfacing. My understanding that we just started the hot mix resurfacing this year, is that correct?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, I think you're talking about hot mix patching.
Different.
Right. So we bought a hot box patcher so that we can fill potholes with hot asphalt. This is like milling off the top layer of a road and putting down a new layer of hot asphalt.
A single surface treatment on top of it.
That's a hot mix resurfacing. Single surface is for the double surface hard surface roads, and it's just putting down one new single surface in there.
Are there any other preventative maintenance treatments, equipment that we'll be seeing in a budget request in the next couple of years that will help with preventative maintenance on our roads? Or do we have all the tools to get us to where we need to go?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, we were looking at the possibility of purchasing a spray patcher. We've rented one for the last 2 summers and found it was a very efficient way of filling in potholes in rural roads especially. So we're looking at the cost benefit of that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor McDougall, Councillor Keesebrink.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for the report, and thank you for taking this on. We knew it wasn't going to be good. We're all a little surprised, but has this study been done before? And if so, what were the numbers like at that time?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, Dave Anderson might know better than me, but I think the last full study was done in 2011, and the numbers at that time are shown in the different graphs that we saw in his presentation. Basically, roads are at a lower level than they were in 2011, and the total roads needs has gone up from about 116 million, that was the now needs, to 139 million.
Further?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. So really, I mean, we're seeing what would happen if we don't significantly increase the roads budget. It will continue to deteriorate over time, I would expect.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, we have, as I showed in that one chart, we have raised our spending over the last few years, And we can maintain an average road condition at what we have now with that budget, but we can't improve it without increasing the budget.
How much do we spend in Scugog percentage-wise in terms of budgets? Do we know how much of our budget we spend on our roads?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, I think, so just on the capital spending, not including staff time, not including winter maintenance, 59% of our budget is spent on road maintenance.
And comparatively to any other municipalities, do we know?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, I did look at a couple other municipalities. Brock was similar to us. Uxbridge was hard to compare because their capital is down right now because they have one very large project that they're working on. But I pulled a couple numbers from Pickering and Ajax, and Pickering spends about 22% of their budget, and Ajax spends about 32% of their budget on road maintenance.
Further?
No, very good, that's all, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Keesebring.
I would like to go back to a comment you made in response to Councillor Guido a moment ago. And maybe I didn't understand correctly, but I understood that with respect to this study that we were looking at the condition of our roads as compared to when the last study was done, which I think was in 2011, and that the results of this study would be taken into account, and that when we prepared our new budget, that we would take what was brought forward in the study. Today in the presentation that the gentleman gave us, the detailed report wasn't part of the slide, but he's literally covered every single road and identified its status. In Ward 4, roads like, Byers and DeWitts and Cedar Grove and Prouts, there's roads that are literally, massive potholes. So your comment to Councillor Guido was that our current 5-year plan will remain intact. Wouldn't this roads need study not be taken into account, and would we not reevaluate to some extent, especially if we do look at an increased budget? Can we not take into account, not just over the long term, but in the short term, some of these really urgent concerns that constituents have gravely expressed to us?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. So we've set expectations for some roads, so unless things have changed a lot, they'd still be our priority when we do it. The biggest difference from getting the roads needs study from what we're doing today is we're doing more reconstructions than what the road study would recommend. So things like Devitt's Road and Byers Road would not come out of the work plan from the study that was done as a reconstruction. The first money would be spent towards preventive maintenance. So we want to continue with the work we're planning. We don't want to, tell someone that, oh yeah, your road will be done next year, and then, oh, sorry, we just did a study, now your road is now number 40 on our list. So we want to go through with what we've told people, but we're hoping that the budget will be extended, that there'll be more to work with, so that we'll be able to do more of the roads and follow more of the roads that are laid out in the study.
Through you, Madam Mayor, so in essence incorporating, so continuing with what we've promised, but hopefully augmenting to that some of the worst case ones that are identified in this report. Is that
Yes,
a correct
exactly.
understanding? Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Thank you. I don't think I have any further questions. I just, looking at recommendation number 4, I hear what you've said about sticking with the 5-year plan because there's expectations and adding preventative maintenance. But on recommendation number 4, preventative maintenance such as hot mix resurfacing, single surface treatments, and gravel road resurfacing and crack sealing, a lot of those things make a tremendous difference in appearance and the way we travel on those roads, that they won't be as bumpy, they'll look better, is that a fair statement?
Yes, that is. And it's not that we're not doing any preventive maintenance, because we do have streets like Water Street and Queen Street in our budget that will be a double surface, a resurfacing of them. Mm-hmm. So we do have those type of projects in our budget already, but we want to add more.
So we'll visibly see some tremendous improvements if we go into the preventative maintenance with an increased budget.
We'll see an improvement, tremendous over time, yes, but it will take a little while to get there.
Yeah, but I mean, in the 5 years, you said if you get the increased funding,
Yes.
you will do no more preventative maintenance. We'll see that.
In 5 years, you will see a big difference in the roads.
Right,
yes.
okay, thank you. Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If I can just, one more question before we finish up here. Goes back to the report from the 4 roads. The system performance versus the funding level that was there, it's found on page 18 of ours. This is the one with the multicolored graph coming up. And the 70 being the system condition that we're looking at. We've recommended, or I'm sorry, you've recommended the 3% increase, which is shown here is that we reach that plateau around 2045. My concern with 3%, 8%, 2% is that how realistic is it that we reach this? Like 2045, a lot happens between now and then. I'm going back to my constituents tomorrow, and I'm going to have a lot of questions on what happened tonight, and I've got to say, well, this 3% is going to get us so that we're under control by 2045, thereabouts. That seems like too much. And I know this is the problem we're saddled with, but are we setting ourselves up for our expectations too high to the constituents, saying 3% will get us to point X, but we're waiting for 2045. So again, your road in front of your house is bad right now, and we can do some patchwork and we can do preventative maintenance, but your road's not, in general, we're going to see to 2045. I'm concerned that this goal is just too lofty for this township at this point.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. So it's not like it's going to jump to 70 and 25 years. It is a gradual increase from then. So we've already started working on the capital budget, and we put a lot of work into it so far. And Diane did put, Director Valentin did put the value in what 3% would look like. And there's a significant increase in the amount of projects we can do. Like in the next 5 years, we could do probably double the projects we're doing now. So you won't get to the 70% quickly, but you will see an improvement in roads fairly quickly over time, and the curve will go up. Now this curve might not be exactly what happens. It's something we would reevaluate again the next time we did this study. So we can monitor it and see, okay, is it working? Yes, it is. No, it isn't. And we can make adjustments at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Brown?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Director Valentin, I just want to confirm that the survey that you've taken that we talked about in part through Councillor Watton, the 50% say that they're in favor of option 4, which is 3%, right?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I think Councillor Watton's survey was that's the regional one, but my survey, yes. There is 3% or 3% following the asset management plan, 3% over 10 years, each year for 10 years. And currently, 50% of the respondents are in favor of that.
Okay, and what percentage of the respondents have other options? Would you have any idea? Is it like 50,
I think
20?
I looked, so about 13% wanted no increase. So 87% wanted an increase. 10% for just 3 years for 1 year, and 50% for 3 years following the asset management plan. So 60% in total are in favor of 3% for 2020.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
pardon me, just for full disclosure, how many respondents do we have on that at present, just so we know the sample size?
80.
Thank you.
How many respondents did we have in the last year's survey?
Last year we had 94. The year before was 134. So I'm really hoping we get more.
Yeah,
I'm trying
I
to push
really
it.
hope people do respond to that survey and to give us a clearer idea of how people are feeling. So that's good. Okay, with no further questions to the motion, and I'm going to read this for the benefit of the listening public or the watching public. that the state of the infrastructure and asset management plan for roads be received. That, part 2, that as part of the annual budget process, a 3% roads levy be considered each year for the next 10 years to increase the capital roads budget to the capital depreciation funding level as recommended in the State of the Infrastructure Report. And part 3, that as part of the annual budget process, the township continue to increase the investment in road maintenance and reconstruction through other means, including identifying efficiencies and cost savings, grant applications with other levels of government, etc. And part 4, that the township follow the principles of asset management and prioritize preventative maintenance such as hot mix resurfacing, single surface treatments, gravel road resurfacing, and crack sealing. Moving back to part 3, many of the council members were at the delegation at AMO, where we emphasized the need that Greenbelt communities need to have extra points towards our applications for infrastructure, because we are in the Greenbelt. So, okay, to the motion, all those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much. Okay, the next presentation is Director Coleman, and we will deal with the municipal infrastructure inventory and inspection report on page 232, with your blessing after the delegation, after the presentation. Director Coleman, the report is on page 232.
Thank you, Mayor Drew. So I just wanted to tie in the report. Oops, wrong direction. Are you? Do I have control of this or just you? Sorry. I don't. How do I go back?
You remind me of myself, Director Coleman.
I'm usually fairly good at this.
Yeah, you are.
I'm hitting the arrows and they're not doing much. Can you go to the very title page? Thank you. So as Mayor Drew said, I'm here to present the 2019 Municipal Structure Inventory and Inspection. This was done by our consultant, Chisholm Plumbing. So it ties into our strategic plan in the roads and municipal infrastructure, financial sustainability, and I'm not touching anything and it's switching. Oh, it must be on a timer. So I have like 7 seconds to present each slide. It's going through on its timer. I can't even end the show. Sorry, I apologize for this.
Should we take a break?
Can you start it back up?
Why don't we have a 5-minute break while we can,
That's a great idea.
okay, we can get that straightened out, okay? Thank you. Okay, we're back in session after recess. We got everything all organized, so go ahead, Director Coleman.
Thank you, Mayor Drew. I will start again. So I'm presenting the 2019 Municipal Structure and Inventory Inspection.
Folks, we're back in session now. Thank you. Go ahead.
And it ties into the strategic plan for roads and municipal infrastructure, financial sustainability, and complete communities. So the inventory and inspection is required under Ontario Regulation 10497 that says the structural integrity, safety, and condition of every bridge shall be determined through the performance of at least one inspection in every second calendar year under the direction of a professional engineer and in accordance with the Ontario Structural Inspection Manual. The township has 18 bridges and 8 culverts under their jurisdiction. And the culverts, we only look at the ones that are greater than 3 meters in diameter. This is a map that doesn't show up very well here, that just shows the locations of our bridges and our culverts. Just to give you an example of some of our bridges, I won't go through all of our structures, but bridge number 9 is on Scugog Line 8, and it has been closed since 2002 due to structural deterioration.
2012.
2012. Repairs in 2018 to make safe for pedestrians and cyclists. So we did just some deck repairs to it. It goes over the Nonquan rivers, and the estimated cost to replace it is about $1.4 million. We have another bridge that's closed, but it's not in use. It's bridge number 16, and it's near Beacock Road and Regional Road 57. You can see the picture of it. It's through an unopened road allowance, and it's been, I left that state, I didn't know the date, but for a number of years, and it's recommended that it be removed at a cost of $130,000. Bridge number 6, we all should know about since we've talked about it many times. It's in Seagrave. It was closed in 2017, again due to structural issues. A full rehabilitation was done in 2018 and 2019. It wasn't replaced, but all the components were rebuilt. It was reopened again in 2019 with weight restrictions. So no work is recommended for this bridge at this time. Bridge number 12 on Job Road. It has weight restrictions in place since 2017. And it's located very close to the Blackstock Works Depot, so it's used quite a bit by our work staff. This report recommends that we do a load capacity analysis, which may show that the loads can remain as they are or be reduced, or this is the type of study that tells us sometimes when bridges need to be closed. And replacement is recommended at about $1.2 million. So the study concludes that our deficit in bridges is approximately $6 million for bridges and culverts. 21 of the 24 bridges and culverts require some form of repair, rehabilitation, or replacement. We need to do ongoing routine bridge maintenance that can be done by our township staff, but also we should be doing a rehab program, and a recommended program was provided by the consultant, and the funding ranged from $780,000 to $1.4 million, depending on what work was recommended. It averages out to about $1 million a year. This graph is similar to the roads graph, where we showed how much we've spent on bridge and culvert maintenance over the last 10 years. The lighter blue shows the operating budget, and it wasn't necessarily spent every year. We've had that in the budget, and if emergencies came up, money was spent, or if some repairs need to be done. The dark blue shows the capital. So you can see in the first 7-8 years, there wasn't very much spent in capital. In 2018 is a large jump because we received a grant from the province to do Seagrave Bridge. And in 2017 and 19, we have been doing some maintenance projects. So similar to the roads, the funding level has been going up a bit, but it's still not enough. What we recommend is to continue to increase investment on bridge and culvert maintenance and construction by continuing to utilize the funds in a roads and infrastructure reserve, the ones that are not specifically dedicated for roads, and also to use portion of the funding we received from the province under the OCIF grant. Continue to identify efficiencies and cost savings in the budget and keep applying for grants for bridges. And also, similar to the roads, we want to use the principles of asset management and do maintenance activities, not just let the bridges fall apart and replace them. If we maintain them, we can stretch the life of them. That's all. If I have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Director Coleman, Thank you. More good news. We have applied many times for the Jobe Road Bridge and were turned down by the province, and I remember suggesting we should change the name and apply again because we constantly have been turned down by province for funding for that. Questions on the delegation, on the presentation? Councillor Brown.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Director Coleman. I just want to clarify, the current budget for this sort of thing is just north of $400,000, is that correct?
That's correct.
And you're recommending that we go anywhere between 781,000 to 1.43 million?
Through the mayor to the councillor, yes, that's correct.
Maybe this is a question for Director Valentin, if I may again, through you, Madam Mayor. Do we have an idea of how much we just talked about, $40 for roads per household per year? Do we have some kind of an idea what the taxes would be increased if we follow through on these recommendations, or is that too vague?
Through you, Madam Mayor, it's a little vague right now. I know that a 1% increase to the tax levy is about $1.09 per month.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, Councillor Brown hit it on the head there. Question is, in the report, the recommendation number 2 says the township work to increase the amount of funding available. Are we looking at jumping to $1 million in this budget year? Or is this, if we're working towards the increase, is this a gradual move in the right direction that we're looking at when it comes budget time?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, the funding that comes from the township will be a gradual increase over time whenever we can find some savings or, some money that is available. The only way at this point, we could jump to a larger amount would be if we were successful in getting a grant for bridges.
Okay, through you, Madam Mayor, just further. So when we're asking for $1 million, just so I'm clear, we don't know where that's coming from right now, or what that's going to look like in the budget?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, we have some funds that we are looking at for that. We do receive that formula portion of the OCIF, the Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund, each year, and last year was, the numbers here, about 152,000. It's going to be increasing in 2020 to about 280,000 or 380,000, I believe. So that will be part of the increase we could use. They also, in the roads and infrastructure reserve, we don't intend to touch whatever roads levies put in because we desperately need that for roads. But we do have other funding sources that come into that, such as some of the surplus funding, portion of the OLG funding, I believe. Just a couple of other sources, and we can use some of that money to slowly increase this fund up to where it should be.
Okay, just one more through you, Madam Mayor. Figure 1 on page 235 is the Scugog Bridge and Culvert operating and capital budgets graph that you'd shown, where 2018 shows the large increase. Can you just speak to, between 2017 and 2019, we have a decrease in the actual operating budget. Is the decrease because we didn't identify that bridges and culverts needed replacing, or maybe you could just speak to why the operating budget and the capital budget in total has dropped from 17 to 19?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. So in 2017, we started identifying specific culverts and bridge projects that we wanted to do, and we found that we didn't spend all the operating money in 2017 or in 2018. So when we're looking at the budget for 2019, we do a line-by-line review And we saw we weren't spending all of that, but we were spending capital dollars, so we decreased our operating budget. We're actually finding this year, though, that we needed more money in the operating, so we'll probably be looking to increase that next year.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor McDougall.
Thank you. Thank you, Carol, for your presentation. Through you, Madam Mayor. A question is, how often are we successful at applications to upgrade or improve these structures with
Never
disregard to
successful with
Job Road?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, well, I've been here almost 3 years and I've had one successful one, that's all I know, but
So,
judging by these numbers, I'm gonna say we haven't had a successful one other than that one in the last 10 years.
okay, so
And Director Coleman is very good at writing grant applications.
I hope so.
Yes, she is.
So just, I mean, so to reassure everyone, I mean, last year I can remember the number exactly, $122,800 was 1% of our budget. So we're looking at roughly like 6 to 8% roughly of our budget is what we need towards these structures. I'm assuming that's not all going to come in the form of an increase? Through to maybe Director Valentine?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, at this time, we're not proposing a specific levy for bridges. We're just looking to gradually increase it through sources that we have available, through efficiencies and through increased grant from the province.
Director Coleman, did you want to add, or Director Valentin, did you want to add anything to that?
Just reiterating what Director Coleman said, we would not be, that is not something that I would be bringing forward as in my target budget. That's not a new levy that we're proposing at this time. Just for clarification, the OCIF funding for 2019 was about $384,000. For 2020, it's $325,000. So that's money that we'll identify through the capital budget coming forward that Director Coleman can identify projects for.
Okay, thank you. That's very reassuring. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Okay, can I have a motion, please, that the presentation be received? Councillor Brown, Councillor Watton, all those in favor? And that's carried. With your indulgence, we will move on to the report on page 232. Anything further you'd like to say, Director Coleman, on this report? No? Okay. Questions or I'll ask for a mover, please, that, read it here. The municipal structure inventory and inspection be received. That as part of the annual budget process, the township worked to increase the amount of funding available for bridges and culverts as recommended in the 2019 OSIM Inventory and Inspection Summary Report, and that the township follow the principles of asset management as outlined in the 2019 OSIM Inventory and Inspection Summary Report and prioritize preventative maintenance such as waterproofing decks, repaving decks, repair concrete soffits, parapet walls, abutments, and wing walls, etc. Mover. Councillor McDougall, Councillor Kiesebrink, questions or comments to the report? All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Our next item is 10.3, Bryce Jordan and Wayne Hancock from GHD. Welcome. And this is on the Oxnard development. And the recommendation report is on page 259. Please proceed.
Okay. Thank you very much, Your Worship, members of the committee. My name is Bryce Jordan. As you've heard from GHD, I'm the planner for Oxnard Developments. With me is Mr. Wayne Hancock, who's the consulting engineer. He will be available to answer questions you may have of a more technical engineering nature, but I will try to run through my presentation fairly quickly. Also in the audience is Mr. Jeff Jaffarpour. He's the principal of Oxnard Developments. First of all, I'd like to thank staff and I'd like to thank everyone for their patience to get to this point in the agenda. I do this for a living. Other people don't, and I appreciate the fact that they've been here for a while. With that said, I'd like to thank staff for bringing forward the report and providing a very thorough review of the issues that were identified at the open house that was held in April. It was actually April 25th. And from that open house, the major issues that I gleaned were about four. One was the need to reconstruct Balsam Street, or more specifically, the poor state of Balsam Street currently, and how could development take place given that poor state. If this road was to be reconstructed, where would the sidewalk be located? And with the sidewalk being located on the north side as the preference of the neighborhood, how do we deal with on-site parking given that the lots would have only single-car driveways, single-car garages? And fourth, there was an a concern, an issue about density and compatibility of the number of units and the size of those units, I assume compared to the existing lots on the south side of the street. So all of these are thoroughly addressed in the staff report. With regard to the first issue, on page 12, the report deals with the reconstruction of Balsam Street, where you'll see in the report that this development is in many ways a catalyst for that reconstruction. Our client, because of the amount of frontage they own, will be contributing about 43% of that reconstruction, and it also allows for the coordination of the new development, the reconstruction of the road, and the implementation, or the replacement essentially, of regional sewer and water too. The way the region works, if you are going to reconstruct a road, they will replace the sewer and water. I understand both the sewer and water facilities, infrastructure in that road are in need of replacement as well. The other thing you will notice in that report is that there were many issues of drainage concerns, given the existing pattern of drainage and the lack of the ability of the existing street to accommodate particularly overland flow. And it's certainly our expectation that with proper design, the reconstruction of the street should be able to adequately improve that existing drainage concern. The second issue I mentioned was sidewalks. You'll see on page 14 that the staff report is indicating that the sidewalk should be built on the north side of the street, that is adjacent to the existing development. And my recollection of the open house is this was the general desire of the neighborhood to put the sidewalk on the north side of the street. Finally, and third was the issue of parking. With the sidewalk on the north side of the street, how do you provide for more than just the typical parking that's required in the zoning bylaw? And at this point, I have a slide that I'm going to need some advice as to how to make it happen. Press the arrow to the right. The arrow? Thank you very much. I'm really bad with this stuff. This is the staff report as opposed to the slide that I sent. It must be a separate file.
That was the one they had.
No, there's another one. Should be another one there.
There was one that came in with the delegation.
I don't want to touch it.
Yeah, and that's the one you had up there before. Mm.
And none of this is what you want to see?
No, this is Mr. Heritage's information.
Yeah, we don't have it.
Okay. Well, let me explain. Essentially, obviously, when you build a sidewalk on many informal circumstances, if there's no sidewalk on that side of the street, people often park so that technically the car is in the boulevard, but it's not overhanging the curb.
Mhm.
And when you build the sidewalk, that opportunity is taken away. So typically, you would have room in a lot of approximately 30 feet, 9 meters, a single-car driveway with a single-car garage, and the one car, room for one car in front of the garage, and then
Would
we-
would
yeah.
you like us to take a quick break so that we can get your presentation?
Sorry,
Director
Madam
Heritage,
Mayor,
what is it you're trying to tell me?
The diagram that's being referred to is on page 5 of the
Oh.
agenda.
There is, yeah, we do have a diagram in our
Okay.
agenda.
Sorry, that is the one I was referring to.
This one
That's
here?
quite all right. This will make it easier. That's one.
That it?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt. Please go ahead.
No, quite all right. So essentially, planning staff have required 2 outside parking spots essentially in this report. And to answer the question of how is that accomplished, essentially the houses will be set further back than is typical so that you can get 2 cars parked in the driveway and still have room in the garage for a 3rd parking spot. I know that everyone says nobody uses the garage. That's not necessarily the case, but even if you don't use your garage for parking, every house would have room for 2 cars to park outside in that driveway. And that is in the staff report on page 14 as a requirement. It doesn't show exactly how that will be done, but it's being put into the zoning bylaw. The 4th matter had to do with density and height, and that's addressed on page 11 of the staff report. I would like to point out that the current approval on the north side of Balsam Street would permit 40 units in an apartment building form, up to 3 stories in height, whereas we're looking at 17 units that would be 2 stories in height. And finally, in looking at that issue, I think one needs to consider that in comparing frontages on 2 sides of the street, one has to recognize that on the south side of the street, the current zoning would allow 30-foot lots on the south side, or 32-foot, 33-foot lots on the south side of the street. So even though there are currently a number of 100-foot frontage lots, those kind of lots really aren't the norm nowadays, and it would be simply a matter of following the zoning bylaw and receiving a severance to build something smaller than that. So with that, in conclusion, Madam Mayor and members of the committee, I would ask that Council adopt the recommendations of the staff report that's in front of you, and we're available to answer questions.
Thank you very much. Can I have a motion, please, that the presentation be received? Councillor Keysbrink, Councillor Watton, all those in favor? And that's carried. Are there any questions of the presentation? Oh, Councillor Keysbrink, I should have asked for questions before I voted. Anyway, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Well, we will be going to the report, but yeah, but not right after this presentation, after the delegation. So go ahead.
Thank you so much for your report for us this evening. I was noticing that the Kawartha Conservation Authority in particular congratulated this development on the low-impact development infiltration techniques. Can you elaborate a little bit about that?
You want me to take a run at that, Wayne? Essentially, what is involved are infiltration trenches. So the infiltration from someone's roof, or the water that falls on their own lot, would end up in an infiltration trench on that lot. So we're not going somewhere else onto some other property. And through that infiltration, what they're looking to obtain in the end of the day, from a Conservation Authority perspective, it's not like other stormwater techniques aren't good and don't work, but it's the reduction in phosphorus, and that's the critical thing they're looking for today. So this type of technique is going to happen more and more. In our circumstance, again, the large front yard you see, because of the extra depth that we have to work with, it helps both in terms of the parking and being able to deal with infiltration.
Just a further comment, we appreciate the contribution that's going to be made to improve Balsam Road. It's good, and it's a good concept and good problem solving for the parking.
Thank you.
Any further questions on the presentation? Councillor Brown?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Gentlemen, thank you. The sidewalk seems to be a slightly contentious issue, and some people want a sidewalk, some people don't want a sidewalk. You said that you basically consulted with there were public consultations, so you have some idea of what the people who live in that area, whether they want one or not. Can you tell me roughly what percentage of people were in favor of a sidewalk as opposed to those who don't want one?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I don't want to misconstrue exactly what was said. I believe that generally speaking, those people on the south side of the street did not want the sidewalk on their side of the street. Whether there was a sidewalk at all on the road, I can't comment on. Certainly they were concerned as well, being the neighbors on the south side of the street, that if there was a sidewalk, that they wanted the parking dealt with. The question about whether there's a sidewalk or not is really one of public policy and the like. So I wouldn't suggest that it's something that you put up to a vote. But what I understood was those on the south side have obviously grown very used to not having a sidewalk and would not be interested in the maintenance and the other things that come along with having a sidewalk. And that's about as best as I could state it.
Okay, and
Director Heritage, I think you have a comment on that as well?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. The Scugog official plan requires on a local road the construction of a sidewalk when the road is being urbanized. So that would fulfill this requirement in the official plan in the construction of a sidewalk on the north side of Balsam Street.
Thank you. Further?
Just one subsequent, and thank you, Director Heritage, for that. Do you have a price point for these? What are you gonna ask for them?
Your Worship, I should prepare myself for that question, but even when I turn around and ask my client, he's going to say, by the time I build these, I don't know what the market is going to be, and you never get an answer to that question because no one ever really knows the answer. So I can't say.
Okay, thank you.
We're looking at we would like to have affordable housing, not necessarily, there's a difference between social and affordable.
Right.
But we need to have that variety of housing in Scugog Township, and I would suggest that if the prices are reasonable, they would sell that much faster.
Correct.
Because there is a big demand for it. Any further questions of the presentation? Okay, so I'll ask again, all those in favor of receiving? That's carried, thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. And we now have 3 delegations, and I'm going to call on Lori and George Bray first. And just a reminder, you have 5 minutes for a delegation. Please come forward, make yourselves comfortable, and press the button till the red light comes on. You're George Bray. Welcome. Please go ahead.
Madam Mayor and councillors, we first want to thank Council and Oxnard Port Perry for accommodating the parking of 3 vehicles in each lot. Much appreciated. Just to address one of the parking that was just discussed, having attended that meeting in April, it was my impression that most of the Balsam Street residents would have been happy to have no sidewalk. So if that's an option, I think the others can speak to it, but we would certainly prefer no sidewalks.
I don't know if you heard Director Heritage's comment. It is something that is kind of written down. We have to have, when a street is being reconstructed or urbanized, there has to be a sidewalk. So.
Okay.
But are you? Well, you'll be on the south side. There won't be a sidewalk in
We're
front
on the
of
north
you.
side. We're in agreement with the rezoning of the subject area. We understand that adding new homes to this area where there are appropriate levels of infrastructure and public service facilities is recommended. It's the number of proposed new homes that remained concerned with, so the density. Currently, there are 8 homes on the south side of Balsam, 7 bungalows, and 1 side split. The proposal would have 20 homes on the north side, 3 of which are existing bungalows. So that's increasing the density in that comparison 2.5 times. It's acknowledged in paragraph 2.2 of the report that the proposed density is somewhat higher than the existing development on abutting properties. 2.5 times seems to be more than somewhat higher. It's mentioned in the Scugog official plan, Schedule A1, that an objective of the residential designation is to maintain and enhance the character and identity of existing residential areas. We don't feel that the proposal we've seen meets that objective. I'd like to ask a question. I don't know if it can be answered here or not, but we noted that a cash payment in lieu of the provision of green space is a requirement. What I'd like to ask is, does that payment equate to green space in the future?
Director Heritage, are you taking note of these questions? Because after the delegation is finished, we will ask questions of the delegate. And are you taking note?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you. Are there any, if you're finished your delegation, fine, just stay seated if there's any questions of the delegate. Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I just want to thank you for coming. It's not an easy thing to do to sit here and plead your case, so I admire that. No sidewalks, you would prefer not to have any sidewalks. I understand you live on the north side of the road. Is there a specific reason that you can give as to why you don't want sidewalks?
Well, drainage has always been an issue in the front of our house, and
Is your mic on still? Sorry, or if it's not, could you please speak into it?
drainage has always been an issue in the front of our house. So remains to be seen if the solutions provided in the development will prevent that drainage from coming across the front. So that would be the east end of our section of Balsam Street. So that's part of it. The other thing is the trees along the front of our homes. So there's two of us here with trees on that side of Balsam Street. So possibly we would lose those as well. I understand it's not too big a deal. Sidewalks are common these days, so we'd have to live with that. It's just that we've lived this long, 30 plus years without them, and so it's a big change.
Subsequent to that, I think that's quite reasonable. May I ask if it's possible, and I don't know if this is a question that you can answer, whether it should be answered here, but these gentlemen are still sitting here. I wonder if have you had a conversation with the gentleman from Oxnard?
No.
Can we arrange something? Would you guys be amenable to talking to this resident before the end of the evening and maybe assuaging some of his concerns? Is that okay with you, sir?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Kiesebrink.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is actually maybe better posed to Director Heritage. I'm just wondering, with respect to the tree, with the sidewalk installation, likely the trees, if they're in that area, would be impacted. Is part of the development the replacement of any trees that need to be removed? Is that kind of part of our strategy at this point?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the Councillor, one of the requirements that's included in the proposed conditions of draft approval is that 1 tree per lot be planted.
Through you, Madam Mayor. So if the trees are impacted that are not part of the development, so this gentleman's home is separate from the development, so if the sidewalks are going in, they're going to be putting up a tree there potentially, but what about the other residents where the sidewalk is put in? Does that include replacement of trees there as well?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the Councillor, I think this gentleman was talking about the potential impact of stormwater running from the proposed development or to the north of the proposed development and impacting his trees. The applicants have put together a fairly detailed stormwater management plan that identifies how the stormwater management will be handled. Stormwater will be handled. The stormwater on the north side of the subject property is going to be treated through the subject property itself, either through these infiltration galleries or bioretention gardens that are in the front yard of each lot, or through the storm water pipe that's going to be installed in the urbanized Balsam Street frontage.
Any further questions of the delegate? Okay, thank you very much. Next delegation is Mr. Bill Anker. Oh, I'm sorry. I need a motion that the delegation from Mr. Bray be received. Councillor Watt and Councillor Brown, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Sorry about that. Next delegation is from Mr. Bill Anker. Please come forward, Mr. Anker. You have 5 minutes. Welcome.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and councillors. A little bit of history on this whole property. First of all, a number of years ago, 1993, I believe, there was funding available for doing some big work. And then Mr. Ray got elected, and this apartment building that was going to be built never got built. So at the time, the neighborhood opposed that. We were thankful it never happened for such a long time. But now that this has come, we're still confronted with a lot of change in a very small area. In fact, the whole area of 17 new places. On the other side of the street, facing them, there's 6. It doesn't even match, right? It doesn't fit. And what is our home will not be our home. Everything will change. The amount of people that are there, gonna miss the park. There's no doubt about that. I understand that it was never meant to be a park, but yeah, I'm gonna miss it, and I don't know if anything more can be done. I'm thankful that there was some accommodation in terms of parking, because they would have been on the street. And in the winter, that street is fairly narrow. It's a bad street anyway. And as far as sidewalks, I know we were talking about that. On the north side, I'm not sure it's even a great idea to have sidewalks, because if you go for a walk there, you will see that there's a problem on the north side with my neighbor, right? He's got a property with a driveway that goes downhill into his garage. So now you're going to put a sidewalk in. If you're going to line it up and take it all the way out to Rosa, which only makes sense, I don't know how you're going to do it and get the flow and everything else. So somebody else needs to take a look at that. And I just wanted to mention that I am not entirely pleased with the whole thing. And I understand it. I'm thankful for what accommodations we have. Part of it's, and anyway, that's it. It's really all I want to say.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Are there any questions for the delegate? Councillor Ross?
Evening. Thank you for coming and speaking with us. I can understand what you're saying as far as the house that you live in now, and how long have you been at the house?
I think 1991 or 92.
Okay, so enough to make some memories in that house, and to be looking across the road to the open field and enjoying that.
Yeah.
When you say it's not going to be the same, assuming that the build goes ahead as planned, are there certain things that can be further accommodated or looked at to help preserve the street's community as it is now? With the new build going in, whether it's aesthetic or if it's policy-wise, have you identified any things that you would like to see?
Some of the things I would have been nice is that there's different size lots, because all the lots are different there in terms of width. I got one of the 110s, right? So you could put 6 of those houses on my property. And my house is going to be smaller than theirs probably. There's a number of them. Different styles. I haven't really seen some. We've seen a few pictures here and there. Like every house on that street is different. So there's all those considerations. I know this is also all financial. It's got to work. Otherwise, they won't be able to do it. And if they mix it up too much, it's going to cost more. So I don't know what the answer is. So, but it's kind of offends me a little bit that into an established community, suddenly we get a whole pocket of everything that's crammed in, and it doesn't fit there. It's not a new street. It's been there for ages, and suddenly there's a major change. So I don't know how to fix it, and I don't know. I'm not at the point that I'm not sure we can even stop it. Not that I don't want anything. We always understood, even when we moved into that place, that there was, I think, 6 lots at the time before the apartment building, or 7. That was part of the Legion property. So anyway, I don't know how to make you all happy, how to make everybody happy, to how to make me happy. But
I don't think we're going to make all of you happy either.
no, I know that. I know. I know change has to take place. I understand that.
Any further questions of the delegate? Okay, thank you very much
You're
for
welcome.
coming tonight.
Thank you.
And now I will, motion to receive the delegation. Councillor Guido, Councillor Kiesebrink, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next delegation is Andra Sayers and Brian Murphy. Hope I've pronounced that correctly. Please come forward. 5 minutes. Do you pronounce your name Andra?
You got it right, yes.
Yes, very pretty name. Welcome.
Thank you. We are residents, red button's on, okay. We are residents, actually our street address is on Rosa Street, but we're at the corner of Rosa and Balsam on the northwest side. And we've got numerous issues or concerns. I'll just read what I have here. First of all, the drainage, stormwater drainage. The current water volume running east on Balsam, yes, east on Balsam, and then north to Rosa Street is already overwhelming the existing ditches and culverts that are there. So we get a lot of surface water coming when it rains a lot. And then a lot of it's coming from the Legion property. So basically we would ask that you put in enough storm grates to accommodate the flow, any drainage issues that would result in flooding the properties that we are on. So it sounds like the infiltration system, I think that may address some of it. So I'm hoping that will work. Now, one of our bigger issues is sidewalks. We have a 110 foot road frontage on Balsam Street. And preferably, we are one of those people who would rather not have a sidewalk. But if deemed necessary, they should be, okay, I think that's been addressed. But perhaps, I guess nobody will consider the south side for a sidewalk, but since we are kind of deemed to have it on the north side, who is going to clear that sidewalk in the winter? It's a sidewalk that goes to Rosa Street, which has no existing sidewalks at all. It's kind of a sidewalk to nowhere unless you're going west to Old Simcoe. And it's, again, it goes back to our lot being 110 feet or 120 actually. We'd have to shovel the amount of snow that 3 or 4 of the other new homes would have to take care of. Could it be considered part of the municipal responsibility, since I do know they clear snow in some areas? We're not always around to be able to manage the snow in a timely way. Anyway, something to think about. And also, we have 8 very mature spruce trees on our property, which is basically on the line between where the municipal property starts and our lawn starts. They are probably 40 feet tall, at least. That I'm kind of worried that the sidewalk may annihilate those trees, that we won't be able to keep them. Is there anything that can be done to save those trees? They're our main privacy barrier against the traffic on Balsam. That's it.
Okay, with regard to the trees, there was a sidewalk put in just in the last couple of year or so ago on Sexton Street where there were huge evergreen trees. They're fine. They're fine. The company that installed the sidewalks was very careful of the roots, and they're fine. They're just a few feet off of the sidewalk. So I'm sure that everything impossible will be done to save those trees, to protect those trees.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, are there any questions of the delegate? Councillor Guido?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Maybe not necessarily the delegate, but to the point you just made, at what point would we know if any trees do need to be taken down for this development?
I can't answer that, but maybe Director Heritage or Director Coleman could probably answer that.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. Through the capital forecast, the township's capital forecast, the design for the urbanization of Balsam Street is to occur in 2020, and the reconstruction is to occur in 2021. As part of the design exercise, staff will be holding an open house to the affected landowners to present a proposed design and get feedback on that design, so that'll be in 2020. So in terms of consideration of trees, that can be dealt with at that point in time.
Okay, thank you. Any further? Any further questions? Councillor Kieserbrink?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just wondering if we can address the delegate's question with respect to snow clearing.
I've got all of the questions. I'm sure Director Heritage has all the questions. It's time to ask questions of the delegate. So I'll call on Director Heritage to answer those questions when we bring the report forward, if that's okay. Okay? Any other questions of the delegate? Councillor Brown?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I just want to clarify that, so when you do shovel snow at your property, you shovel it just off the driveway because you don't have the sidewalk.
Correct.
What's the frontage of your property? Do you know?
Well, it's including whatever belongs to the municipality, it'd be 120 by 120.
Well, that's a lot of sidewalk.
But there's no sidewalk, you said, on Rosa?
No sidewalk on Rosa.
So it would just be the
Just for that.
Balsam, okay. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, no further questions. Thank you very much for your delegation, and your questions will be answered. May I have a motion, please, to receive the delegation? Councillor Kieserbrink, Councillor McDougall. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. And the first report after all, oh, sorry, we've got one more. 10.7, Mr. Edmund Duarte. He's not here. I beg your pardon? Do we want to bring the report forward now? Okay, well, we'll bring this report forward now then. And that is on page 259. Director Heritage, would you like to address some of those questions that came forward?
Sure, Madam Mayor. In terms of the issues that Mr. Bray brought forward, the first one was increased density is too high, too many homes that are being proposed along the north side of Balsam Street. The Scugog official plan for low-density residential development permits singles and semis. The proposed development certainly complies with the form of development that we're looking at as part of this proposal. The other issue he raised was parkland, and one of the conditions of draft plan approval recommended by staff is that we take cash in lieu of parkland. So we, under the Planning Act, municipalities can take 5% for residential development for cash in lieu of parkland. So we'll be taking that. The drainage issue, and a number of the deputants raised that issue. As I indicated, the proposal will improve the drainage situation for the lands to the north that are draining towards the subject property, as well as to the lands to the east. That whole situation will be improved in conjunction with the urbanization of Balsam Street. Mr. Anchor indicated there's a lot of change, too many houses. Another comment I would like to make too is that with the revised proposal that the applicants brought forward, reducing the number of lots from 18 down to 17, what will appear along the streetscape, they will appear as single detached homes. They're only attached below grade for 16 of them, and the other lot will be a single detached home on its own. He indicated he was going to miss the park. It must be remembered that these lands are designated for residential development. They're not designated for open space or parkland at this point in time in the Scugog official plan. So they, in the fullness of time, they will probably be developed for residential purposes. He indicated he supported accommodation for parking for the 2 parking spaces in the driveway and 1 in the garage. And he raised an issue with the sidewalk on the north side, and as I indicated, that will be reviewed as part of the overall design of the urbanization of Balsam Street, and there will be a public open house that affects the residents along Balsam Street. They'll be invited to comment on any design that comes forward in 2020. And the last presenter talked about stormwater drainage on the east side of Balsam Street, north on Rosa. The proposal will address this issue. And then the sidewalk issue and the impact on trees, that will be discussed as part of the overall design next year. And in terms of the removal of snow, in this area, residents will be responsible for removing snow from their sidewalks.
Anything else from your report you would like to highlight?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much for answering those questions. And I have to say, the bioretention gardens, I mean, we haven't had any significant development in Scugog Township for quite some time, but I have seen this type of good use of land and for drainage in other areas in Newmarket and in areas that actually flooded where the street was closed, and they put these bioretention gardens in, and it's been tremendously successful and very attractive too. So I'm quite excited about that myself. So thank you very much for including that in the preliminary talks. So, may I have a mover for the motion, please? And then we'll take questions. Councillor Kiesebrink, Councillor Ross. Questions to the report? Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you, Director Heritage. If I live on the north side of Balsam, and I've lived there for a number of years, and development comes around and they're going to put sidewalks in, but I haven't had a sidewalk in my property, what recourse do I have? Do I have to have a sidewalk on my property if it's in front of my property? If all the houses that are being built get a sidewalk, that's one thing. If I don't want a sidewalk at the corner where I am because there's no sidewalk on Rosa, do I have an argument to make there?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. When the township urbanizes roads within the urban area, the intent is to provide sidewalks, depending on the level of road or the hierarchy of the road. As I indicated, the Scugog official plan requires sidewalks on one side of the road for local roads. It's to provide an interconnecting system for pedestrians throughout the urban area. And ultimately, sidewalks will be built once these roads are fully urbanized. So there will be a connecting system of sidewalks in the urban area. And the intent is for a number of issues in terms of safety, a whole host of reasons.
Okay, just subsequent to that, if I got it through, Madam Mayor. The frontage, 18.4 meters, is that, do I get that frontage correct? Is that more or less what it is? Will you just tell me what that is in feet, because I'm a little slow when it comes to that sort of thing. How many feet are we dealing with? Because I think these are some of these lots across the street are 110-foot lots, or, right, 110, 100?
Through you, Madam Mayor,
So
to
what
the
are we
council,
dealing
the
with?
lots on the other side of the street, on the south side of the street, range from approximately 16 meters to 33 meters. So that's
Carry the 7.
About 65 feet to 130 feet.
So just to clarify, so the lots across the street from these older homes, are between 65 and 130 feet across?
No, those are in reference to the older homes on the south side of Balsam Street.
Okay, so the newer ones are 65?
No.
No, the newer ones?
No. The newer homes are 30-foot lots.
So you could conceivably fit 3 of those homes in one of the other lots?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Councillor McDougall.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for your presentation. Currently, is the property zoned RM-4?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, yes, it's RM4 dash. Yeah, it's RM4 dash. It permits 40 units in an apartment building.
So, although we're looking at is it 17 units, sorry?
That's correct.
Mm-hmm.
So 17 units is significantly less than 40, although it is more than 7 lots. I think the official plan, if I might through you, Madam Mayor, the official plan talks about sympathetic, I'm going to paraphrase, but I think it's sympathetic development. Would this be considered low density and sympathetic to that area?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, my opinion is yes, it would be. It is low density. As I indicated, when you look down the streetscape, it will be detached dwellings, appear as detached dwellings, and it's compatible with what is in the area. It's less than half of the permitted density that's permitted now under the current zoning.
One further question, just to clarify, knowing the area fairly well since I was very little, the north drainage and the drainage that's around the swing set area that kind of drains towards the back of the homes at the corner of Balsam and Rosa, will that be picked up in some of the drainage applications in the engineering side?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, yes, it will. Based on the conceptual plans we've seen to date, they haven't done the detailed engineering yet, but that will come.
Very good, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions? To the motion, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Now we have a delegation from Mr. Edmund Duarte. If I pronounce that correctly. Mr. Duarte, you here? Okay. Yes. One more time, Mr. Duarte, are you here? Okay, we will, I beg your pardon? We'll move on to item number 11.3 then, page 290. Zoning bylaw. I'm sorry, what, no, 11.3, sorry?
It's 11.4 you're up to.
Oh, sorry, there's an issue of the numbering. Okay, 11.4. Is that it? Oxnard, yes, 11.4. The zoning bylaw amendment for Jacob and Barbara Bishop. And the recommendations are there. This came from Nicola Alston. Is Nicola still here? There you are, Nicola. What is it about that seat? I did the same thing with Kevin Arsenal. Nicola, is there anything you would like to highlight on this report, or is it there for our reading and understanding?
Through you, Madam Mayor, it is up to you. I'm happy to outline it or receive any questions you may have.
We'll go straight to questions and then motion on the recommendation. First, Councillor McDougall, Councillor Guido. Questions? Councillor McDougall, did you have your hand up for a question? I'm sorry. Councillor Watton.
Just if you could, please, I know that there's the 3 properties, so I'm guessing, and if I understand your report correctly, there will be 3 residential homes on these. Which lot has a home now?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the lot outlined in yellow has a current dwelling on it.
Is it the only one?
That's correct.
Okay, I must have misread something. That's fine. Thank you.
Any further questions? All those in favor of the recommendation? And that's carried. Thank you. Do you have any other reports for us? The next one. Okay. 11.5. Youngfield Farms. Page 303. We can move right to questions, I think, unless there's anything that you would like to say. Questions on this? May I have a motion, please? The motion is there. Councillor Kiesebrink, seconder. Councillor Ross, questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. I hope you enjoy the remainder of your son's birthday today.
How's it? Happy birthday.
Well, tell him we all wish him a happy birthday and sorry that we kept his mum so long. Thank you very much, Nicola. Is that it? We're done? Almost. No correspondence, no new business, no closed session. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Guido, Councillor Kiesebrink, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Wow,